As a global civilization today, we have so many problems. This next album I write could be just me listing crises, and it would be a quadruple vinyl double album 2-hour opus. The way we structure things right now and some of the values that we hold do not align with nature. They do not align with public health, and they do not align with human flourishing. And one of the things we've always tried to do as Shikari, it's almost like a mission statement really, is to try and provide the broader perspective, or to try and encourage people to see things from the broader perspective. And I think that's because it's only when you zoom out and you look down and you connect phenomena together, it's only then that you can spot the root causes to problems, and it's only then that you can therefore progress. So what I want to do is write an album about human possibility, to hopefully reveal the core problems, like where we're going wrong and what we can do to change that.
Nothing is true and everything is possible.
Our genre. Our music is dynamic and passionate, and that's the only framework we've ever worked by.
Our influences span across pretty much every genre, from the hardcore punk scene to metal, across the other side to electronica, drum and bass and house.
When we discovered the pure raw emotion that you can get from incorporating rave elements, the euphoria of rave elements, with our already existing aggressive, energetic, hardcore full band elements.
I remember when we were like 15, 16 in my parents' house, and Rao, you coming along and saying, I really want to get that euphoric feeling. What's the one genre with the most euphoric feeling? And then you were like, trance, rave music, and that's when you started buying the electronics and putting it into the music, and that was when we were like 15 or 16.
Yeah.
We thought it was important to showcase our rave influences from the outset of this album, like loudly and clearly from the start of the album. Like rave elements have made up a big part of our sound since day one. And I think, there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, because simply we grew up in the aftermath of the 80s and 90s rave scene. I was introduced to The Prodigy by my uncle when I was 10 years old. So it's been a big part of our musical upbringing, I think. So it sort of naturally seeps into the music that we create. But also it's a political decision. Like, rave emerged out of a specific period of British history where this pervasive idea of individualism was just kicking off. There was this rhetoric that as humans, we're all nothing more than selfish individuals. You know, this idea that it really is every man for themselves. It's what I call the cult of personal responsibility. We're all responsible for ourselves. There's no such thing as a collective or a community. As Margaret Thatcher said, there is no such thing as society. And throughout the 80s, her famous war with the miners wasn't just her against the industry. It was her against a whole communal way of living that the mining communities epitomised. So rave developed as a sort of antidote, really, to this narrative of extreme individualism. So at a rave, the idea of the self would be lost. The idea of an individual would be lost. You would be in a mass of people moving as one. You were in the moment. You were dancing to the rhythm together. And this was the cultural backlash. This was the fight back against the idea that there was no such thing as society. Rave was a reaction. It was a counteraction to the times. Optimistic futurism defined human possibility in the early 1900s. We imagined where technology would take us in the future.
If visibility is poor, our windshield becomes a radar screen, showing the outline of objects ahead.
The word possibility has often been used in the positive context. Anything is possible, redefining what's possible, infinite possibility. But as the 1900s progressed, a more negative air began to develop around the word. Through our technological ingenuity, for the first time ever, we developed the ability to destroy ourselves completely. Albert Einstein wrote in the New York Times in 1946, The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything save our modes of thinking, and we thus drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists was founded in 1945 by Einstein and the scientists who helped develop the first atomic weapons. They created a symbolic clock that represents the likelihood of a man-made existential catastrophe on Earth. At the start of 2020, they set the clock the closest it's ever been to midnight.
So I sometimes think about the entire history of humanity as a vast journey through the wilderness. And there are times of hardship, but also times of sudden progress and heady views ahead. And that just recently, in the 20th century, after 10,000 generations of humanity, we've made it through this high mountain pass, and we can see ahead of us some beautiful vistas and fertile lands that we might be able to make it to. But before we can get there, the only way forward is this narrow, crumbling path on a cliff ledge with a deep precipice to our side. And that if we make a wrong move, it may be our last. And we're not exactly sure how high these risks are. It's very hard to put a number on it. But we know it's the most dangerous time that we've encountered so far, and that this could be our last moment. This is what I call the precipice, and I think that we entered this time period in 1945 with the development of nuclear weapons, the first time that the risks that we pose to ourselves surpassed the risks from the natural world. And it will end either if we fall, or if we get to the point where we forever cease to pose such risks to ourselves again.
So the album starts off with a piano riff, which happens to be the oldest riff on this album. We've traced it back to a session from 2014. I don't have much of a memory of it, but I remember it being a very dark and gloomy winter's day, and me and Rory were sort of jamming with these quite forlorn, delicate chords.
What's 2014? Is that Minesweep?
Minesweep era. And obviously it was a demo that never made it to the album.
It does make this riff feel a lot sadder, doesn't it?
We knew that there was something there with that piano loop.
So we literally never get rid of anything that we write. I mean, where has this been kept for the last 7 years?
Immensely overcrowded Dropbox for future posterity.
Rao came to us with the idea of writing a song about the pivotal moment we're in as a species, and just how tense it all is. And I think we all agreed that this riff was just absolutely perfect.
Yeah, we took this piano loop and bit crushed it and affected it and popped it in here. So humanity has fairly recently, in the grand scheme of things, reached this point that every intelligent species, every technologically proficient species will reach, or has already reached. And this point is where a species invents the means for its own destruction. So be that through weaponry, industry, stubborn allegiances to dangerous self-defeating ideas. So for example, the ideology of perpetual economic growth on a finite planet. That's a dangerous idea. So when a species reaches this particular stage, the question then becomes, will it overcome its internal division and power struggles and learn to employ its technology peacefully and wisely, or will it destroy itself? That is what I refer to as the great unknown.
The first lyric on the album is a literal question. This could be the beginning of a new age, or it could be the end of humanity. We're not trying to be theatrical, we're not trying to be just trying to say something that's on vogue. This is something that we've been talking about our whole career, and trying to push things forward.
The threat of nuclear conflict, the threat of climate change, ecological decline, resource depletion, it's all happening at a time of obscene inequality, a time of increasing tribalism and political polarization, decreasing trust in each other, trust in institutions, trust in the media, trust in democracy itself. And I find myself thinking that human possibility, it's no longer something of a optimistic promise. It's now a terrifying threat. Hold on. Hold on a minute, I hear you saying this is all a bit excessively negative and gloomy, isn't it? Humans have always banged on about the end of the world, religious prophecies and predictions. We've always been on the edge of collapse. Just look back through history. Famine, disease, even supervolcanoes and comets. Comets have long been hailed to be signifiers of doom. And in 1910, the return of Halley's Comet was thought to bring the end of the world once more. The New York Times reported that cyanogen gas would impregnate the atmosphere and possibly snuff out all life on the planet. People panicked. Many rushed to purchase gas masks and comet pills. The Atlanta Constitution reported that one man even asked to be lowered to the bottom of a dry well, armed with nothing else but a gallon of whiskey. See, the thing is, today our situation simply is very different. The main phenomena with the potential to snuff out all life on the planet isn't celestial objects plummeting towards the Earth, but in fact, it's a plethora of dangerous human actions, human technologies and tendencies.
So every generation has its eschatology, has its picture of the end times and its fears of doom. And of course, constantly that hasn't happened. You know, the predictions of the Great Revelation, the apocalypse, haven't taken place. And so that makes us complacent. We say to ourselves, well, fine, you know, all those other predictions didn't work out. Why should these predictions of doom work out? Well, obviously, we're all hoping they won't. And many of us are fighting every hour of every day to try to stop that from happening. And I'm really hoping we're going to succeed. But the difference between our eschatology, our view of this potential collapse and that of previous generations is ours is based on something called science. And the accumulating weight of science just pushes that view more and more strongly towards seeing our global systems as being in profound peril, and that peril potentially endangering us and most of the other life forms on Earth today. So while what I'm talking about is the extreme scenario of total collapse, it's not a scenario which is just plucked out of the air or provided by some religious revelation or by an opium dream. This is something which has emerged from the science of complex systems.
So human possibility is now so engorged with negative connotations. There's so many ways in which civilization risks collapse. And we're not talking about collapse as in something comparable to the 2007 financial crisis. We're talking about existential risk.
An existential risk is either the risk of human extinction or anything else that would permanently destroy the potential of humanity. So, for example, if something could collapse our civilization such that it could never be restored again, and that we were, that we had a civilization in ruins and could only achieve, the barest parts of what we have now, then that would also be an existential catastrophe, as would perhaps a permanent global dictatorship or something like that. Anything that destroys not just our present but our entire future, because it destroys not just what we actually have but our entire potential.
Toby puts the probability of an existential disaster this century from natural causes like comets or supervolcanoes at 1 in 10,000. That's a 0.10% chance. But once you start adding in the anthropogenic risks like nuclear war, climate change, artificial intelligence and bioterrorism, the threat becomes much larger.
And altogether, I would say that the chance that that humanity fails in this century is about 1 in 6, a die roll. That doesn't mean that it need be too gloomy. That means there's, I think, a 5 in 6 chance that we do make it through. But I want to be clear, I'm not talking about, something that has like a 1 in a million chance, like wearing a seatbelt, where you're better safe than sorry. I think this is something where there is a very real chance.
So when we kind of take a step back, I think it's absolutely clear that for the first time in history, we're seeing these existential risks. We have really strong scientific evidence that these existential risks are real, and it fits the theme of your song, The Great Unknown, because we're really now starting to realize that we're kind of riding blind into this future. All we do know is that the paradigm that we're riding in is really destructive. It's self-destructive, it's destructive internally of our social systems, and it's destructive of our environment, which is the biosphere which we rely on to survive. So we know that if we carry on like this, something is going to break at some point, but we don't know when and why. And that's actually quite a scary place to be when you think about it.
The Arecibo Observatory has been used to search for signals from civilizations in space. But is there anyone out there to talk to?
You know, we're faced with this fundamental question that Fermi asked of where are they? If there are so many stars out there, if there are 100 billion stars in our galaxy, and 100 billion chances to create life and a flourishing technological civilization around any of those stars, how come all of those 100 billion opportunities seem to have come to nothing, at least as far as we can tell?
There are many suggested explanations for the Fermi paradox. One particularly dark suggestion offered by Carl Sagan is that it may actually be the nature of all advanced civilizations to destroy themselves.
There are an enormous number of stars. Only some of them will have planets suitable for life. On only some of those worlds will intelligence arise. And perhaps a few of those civilizations will avoid the trap jointly set by their technology and their passions.
But imagine if we were to find some evidence, to receive some signal from some faraway extraterrestrial species, that would confirm to us that it is possible for an advanced civilization to safely traverse the precipice, to survive, to have a growth in wisdom that equals the growth in technology. This would prove that it's possible to transcend the great unknown, that it's possible for humanity also to be able to avoid destroying themselves completely. I sing in the song that I stare at the skyline, I reach for a lifeline. If there's anyone out there, just give me a sign. This is me pleading with extraterrestrials to prove their existence and thus make us feel that we have a chance to make it. So Sagan also had another, more light-hearted explanation as to why we haven't made contact yet. He said that intelligent extraterrestrials may perhaps have a waiting time before contact is considered appropriate, so as to give us a fair opportunity to destroy ourselves first. Which I just love, because it's like you can imagine that somewhere out there's these extraterrestrials sitting down with their feet up, excitedly watching the latest episodes of Humanity, the reality TV show, as we edge closer and closer to destroying ourselves.
They're trying to see if we make it past the first season before they make their appearance. Very plausible answer to it. Maybe a disappointing answer is that it's very plausible that actually life hasn't started around any other star systems. This is quite possible, because even though there are 100 billion of them, there are plenty of opportunities for life to be very rare. It may involve a very delicate combination of things, and the chance that that combination of things goes right goes down exponentially as you add more things into this combination. So it's very easy for a factor of 100 billion to be outweighed by the challenges involved in getting life started. We are exceptionally rare and special, and I think that it's more likely than not that we're alone in the observable universe. And that seems, if anything, to just make it even more important that we make it through this difficult time period, and that we make a commitment never to expose ourselves to these types of risks again, never to let individual nations create and threaten to use weapons that may destroy the whole of humanity and everything our ancestors have worked towards for these 10,000 generations.
Throughout this docuseries, we're going to explore some of the biggest risks we face, their root causes, our emotional reaction to them, and some of the ways which we can better equip ourselves and our society to face the great unknown.